Hi everybody and welcome to my monthly cosplay tutorial series. This month I am going to be focusing on all of the different ways, well, some of the different ways in which you can color resin. There's a number of different techniques that you can use, and different techniques work for different types of resins and different effects. So I'm going to try and showcase the differences of how those come out in this video. So let's get started. So what you are going to need for colored resin is obviously either resin, either clear or opaque, or finished resin pieces. Here we have from a previous video a clear resin heart piece, and then this is an opaque white star. And then depending on what you want to do, you're going to need paint or resin pigment. Now, if you are coloring an opaque piece, you are going to want opaque resin pigment. If you are trying to color a clear piece, you are going to want clear or see-through, or however they advertise that you non-opaque color pigment, and it will say typically somewhere on the packaging that this color yields an opaque result or a clear result. Or one other technique that you can use utilizes nail polish. And since you are just coloring Resin Gems with this, it doesn't have to be super fancy, high quality nail polish. You can get your nail polish from the dollar store and no one will think any less of you. Each of these different painting techniques that I'm going to show you are useful for obviously different end results. So first of all, because it's going to take a little while to finish up, I'm going to show you guys the resin pigment technique. So for this, you are going to need your resin pigment, your resin. In this case, I am using opaque resin because my pigment is not clear. You would do literally the exact same thing for clear resin with a clear pigment as I'm going to do for the opaque. You are going to need measuring cups. If you are like me and you like to mix in a different cup so that you don't destroy all of these, a little mixing cup, popsicle stick, and a mold. So, this one does not specify which side it gets added to. Different brands sometimes will specify that they need to get mixed into one of the sides, as we went over in my last resin casting video. There is an A side and a B side to any resin. Okay, now, typically what you want to do, because resin does have a tendency to cure pretty quickly, is you want to mix your color completely into part B before you mix parts A and B together. Now, this stuff is highly concentrated, so a little bit goes a long way. You typically don't need very much at all to get a pretty vibrant color. Depending on how much resin you're mixing. Like if you're doing a big batch, you'd want, you know, maybe a drop or two. I typically mix resin in small batches because I'm only casting 1 or 2 things at a time. So I like to mix it pretty lightly, and I'll basically just get a little pigment on my popsicle stick. They're just a little drop. And just mix it into part B. And stir and stir and stir like a maniac. Make sure that it is 100% combined. You don't have any weird little like strings of color or anything like that. Okay. So now see, it's nice and red. So now I'm gonna pour my part A in to my little cup. Go. I'm gonna add my part B. And see here, I've got my little drop of red in there, and I'm just going to mix until it is fully combined. And then I'm just going to gently pour it into my mold. Got a little extra, so I'll pour it into this guy. Whoop, whoop. That is at a bad angle. This one. Side note that I'm just now realizing I have not mentioned previously. You want to make sure that your mold is flat, like level, when you go pouring things into it. Otherwise, this is what will happen, and it will just drip completely out of the mold and make a mess, and then you will be very unhappy. Now, while that piece cures, I'm going to show you the other 2 techniques that I like to use for coloring my resin pieces. All right, technique number 1 is pretty straightforward, and you've probably already done this before. It's painting. I know, we're learning really new things today. So here is a resin piece that I made in my previous tutorial on resin casting. Now I have gone through and sanded this piece to make sure that my edges are even, and I've taken the sandpaper to the front of the piece as well, to rough it up a little bit and give the paint something to adhere to, but also to make sure that that front is nice and flat and it's going to look nice once it's painted, and to make sure that there's no weird residues on from any resin that didn't cast fully or didn't cure fully, or had I cast this in, say, a plastic molds and used a mold release, you want to get all of that residue off so that you have a nice clean surface to paint on. So now I am using just a standard acrylic paint from my local craft store. You always want to make sure that you shake it up. Shake it up. Get that color nice and well mixed. And I don't know if anybody else paints like me, but particularly when I'm doing small pieces or detail work, I'll take the cap off of my paint and pull the paint from the excess that's like stuck inside the cap. Now, I know some of you who are super great painters and armor makers and cause builders and things are going to watch this and go, oh my god, that bitch didn't use primer. I don't always use primer. It kind of depends on what the project is, whether the piece is going to have like a lot of wear and tear on it, or like strain put on it. If it's for me or for a client, like if it's for a client, hell yeah, I always use primer because I want it to last for freaking ever. But if it's something that's just for me, it's a small piece like this. This is just a star that's going to go on a choker. I'm not too worried about the paint undergoing a lot of extra stress that might cause it to peel or crack or anything like that. But were this a bigger piece, like something that was going to go on like armor or shoulder pauldron or a shoe or something like that, it's going to have a lot of strain put on it, yes, I would absolutely use a primer, but it's kind of up to you. If you're in a hurry, as long as you've sanded your piece well so there's a nice grit for the paint to grab onto, I normally wouldn't worry too much about using a primer, but that's just me. Now, the last technique that I'm going to show you is specifically used for clear resin pieces. Now, clear resin, as I mentioned earlier, can also be colored using the same technique that I showed you that's curing here with a resin pigment. And you would mix your clear resin pigment into part B of your resin. You would mix the two together and then you would pour it in like normal and it would come out as just a solid, clear, pink, red, blue, whatever color gem. But the technique that I like to use the most, because I think it looks really nifty and you can do a lot of cool stuff with it, is use nail polish. So since this gem is a sample, I'm going to show you two different nifty things that you can do. So the first thing you want to do, as always, is prep your resin piece. Since this is just a sample, I have not bothered cleaning it up, but it actually doesn't look too bad. So if you wanted this piece to be all one color, you would take whatever color it is that you want it to be, and just paint it on the back. Make sure you get it all the way up to the edge. can already see. It's starting to turn red. So now you would just build up from there. You want to do a couple layers, make sure it gets nice and thick. So you want to build up your layers here to get it to a point where you're not seeing, you can't see your hand through it from the back. And when you look at it from the front, you're not seeing any like weird splotchy bits. And what I like to do is do about 2 or 3 layers of whatever color it is that I want the piece to be. And then I will let that dry, and then I'll put either a darker version of that color, this is like a very deep maroon, or a black over the back. So the back is nice and opaque, but then when you look at it from the front, it's got that look of just a nice shiny gemstone. Now, the other cool thing that you can do with this nail polish technique is you can create like very magical looking effects for, like, say your character has some kind of like magic stone on their costume, or like on their magic wand or staff or whatever it may be. You can make your piece look super magical by taking a bunch of different colors Here we go. So it's just nice and splotchy. Looks pretty ridiculous from this side. But when you flip it over, it's got this really cool like galaxy effect. So now, ooh, yeah, all of this is like still super wet. So now I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'll do a coat of the darker color over the back, and that should just kind of seal everything and make it look really like magical and spacey. Okay, so I've got my 2 sides. You can see the differences through the front. So now I'm just gonna go over them with the darker color to seal them in. As I'm sure you can tell, my nail polishes are the highest quality. I have had most of them since junior high school, so they're a little ancient, but I have been using them for working on Resin Gems for a number of years now, and they work perfectly fine. So if you have old nail polishes that you're like, ah, fuck my life, I should probably throw these away, like, they're so old and goopy and I can't use them on my nails, don't throw them away. Save them for making resin gems. Okay, and then on this red side, I'm going to use darker red. Now, if you are a dude bro who's trying to do this technique and using these tiny little nail polish brushes is driving you bananas, what you could do is dump these out into like a little paint tray and use a paintbrush. You can also, if they start to get really goopy, thin them out a little bit with some rubbing alcohol or acetone and just put like a couple tiny drops in the bottle and shake it up until it starts moving again. So here we have the galaxy side with a black behind it, and here we have the red with a darker red maroon behind it. And now we're just gonna flip it over. Oh, how cool is that? So see how when I move it, you can see a little bit of the sparkle of the glitter that's in this red nail polish. And it's that nice vibrant red color. And then over here, you've got that cool galaxy look. As you move it, you're seeing the different colors. And you could use different colors depending on what the character is or what effect it is you want to create. That's kind of the cool thing about making things like this yourself, is you have complete control over how you want the end result to look. And while we're sitting here looking at these, let's go ahead and pop this guy out. So here's that resin gem that we cast at the beginning of the video. Now, I actually could have used quite a bit more red pigments in this, because once that chemical reaction happened and it started turning white, it actually turned really, really pink, which I really like. It's a really pretty pink color. But had I used maybe a full drop of the pigment, it may have come out a little more red. And that's kind of the thing about resin, and particularly when you're using resin pigments, is you really kind of have to experiment a little bit. Cast a couple small pieces with varying amounts of pigment in it before you cast your final piece, because there's really no way to know until you screw it up how much pigment is going to be enough or too much. So there is, this one's still wet, so I'm not going to like set it down, but there's our 3 different techniques for coloring resin, at least as far as we've covered in this video. There's probably 1,000,000,001 more, but this is what we're going over today. So we have clear resin painted on the back with nail polish. We have opaque resin with resin pigment added to it. And we have opaque resin piece that has been hand painted. Let's just gonna set this guy down and show you guys the difference. So here's our piece that was hand painted, and you see the back is white. So it's just the front and the sides that have been painted. Whereas this piece, because the pigment was mixed into the resin, the entire piece, all the way inside out, is all that same color. So again, the technique that's best for you is going to depend on you and what character you're doing and what the project is and all of those different factors. But you do have a lot of different options in working with colored resin. Thank you all so much for watching this month's episode of my cosplay tutorial series. I hope that the information that I have provided you gives you at least the first steps towards working with resin and coloring resin in whatever way it is that you choose to pursue. If you have any questions at all about these techniques, please feel free to leave a comment, send me a message, an email. If it is too terrifying for you, I do take commissions through my Etsy shop. There's tons and tons and tons of amazing sellers. Starlit Creation is my #1 recommendation. They did all of the resin pieces for all of my Sailor Moon costumes. So if you are too terrified by this at this point, do not feel pressured to try it yourself. You can go to others. But I do recommend, as you start to branch out and get a little braver in your cosplay endeavors, that you try working with resin, because it really is a lot easier than it seems, and it's a lot of fun, and you can create 1,000,001 different things that look super duper cool if you can figure out the logistics of working with these materials. I want to shout out to my patrons who not only got to see this video a month in advance, but also are the reason that I am able to do this and provide you with these videos every month and make costumes and stream on Twitch and anything else that you may come to me or any of my social media for. All of it is thanks to them. So to my patrons, thank you. I love you so much. I would be nothing without you. If you are interested in becoming a patron and helping me continue to create costumes and videos, please, please, please feel free to check out the link down in my description. No pressure or expectations, but the option is always there if that is something that you are interested in. Anywho, thank you all so much for watching. I will be back next month with another tutorial. If you have any suggestions of something that you would like to see me cover, please feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Love you all. I will see you soon. Bye.